Hey everybody, I'm Tom Alexander, the head of AI at Cross Country Consulting, and this is Field Notes. Today, we've got Zach Hemmant-Low, the Chief Sales Officer at Rossum AI. Rossum is a tool that is taming document chaos, an issue near and dear to the heart of all CFOs out there. Looking forward to the discussion with Zach today. So welcome, Zach. We're so glad to have you here. This is going to be fun. I've heard amazing things from our source to pay team about you and working with you and the team. So great to be with you today. Tell us something fun about yourself. Intro yourself to the audience.
Yeah.
What's interesting about you, Zach?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about interesting. I was probably the interesting fact that a lot of people don't know. I actually used to be a chef before I started my sort of career in software. So you wouldn't typically think they're similar, but I think in the world of sales, I think when you're a chef, you have to have a lot of different things going on at the same time. You have to work out timings for different things, and I think a lot of that transitioned into the world of sales and working with customers. I don't think you have better customer management and customer expectation than hospitality, and that's always been my sort of throughput there. So managing expectations, doing those sort of things. And yeah, now I'm, as you said, Chief Sales Officer for Rossum AI. We'll talk a lot about Rossum as we go through today. What my role is I look after our global revenue business. So that is everything in terms of our new business teams, working obviously with our partners, both our technology partners, as we'll speak about as well today, and obviously our existing customers. And we've got about 450 of those customers now, predominantly in the large enterprise space. And hopefully I can use some of the knowledge that we have from our existing customers and part some of that knowledge with the podcast that we're going to do today.
Okay, that sounds great. So I have to ask, a chef, what was your specialty? What was your go-to meal?
I would always say probably beef Wellington. It's as British as it gets, isn't it? That I think
that is very British. Yeah,
it is.
Not one of my favorites, I'll tell you, Zach. Was there a second? Would you ever run around for the audience?
I don't know. I'll have to come back to you on that one. Okay. I'll definitely come back to you on that one.
All right. Well, I'm sure our finance team can relate to having a lot of irons in the fire.
Yep.
And a lot of things ongoing to do their particular job. So tell us more about the tool. Tell us more about what do you talk to your clients about, how you highlight Rossum, position it in the market.
Yeah, so Rossum falls in a unique space. It's a space called intelligent document processing, right? And essentially what that is taking high volume transactional documents and automating the documents through the finance journey from end to end. What that is in theory is essentially an AI model that Rossum sits with, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, as we go through, that can extract the data. It can then perform the tasks of most of the finance teams. That's things like GL coding. It may be things like approvals, escalations, and fully put them through or post them into those downstream systems. So into the ERP systems, the procurement systems. That's a lot of where the majority of Rossum's work with the CFO office sits today.
Okay, Zach, tell us more about the tool itself. Tell us more about what Rossum accomplishes.
Sure. So Rossum is we're 9 years old. 9 years old this year, which is really exciting. We started as an AI technology. We're founded by 3 AI PhD students. We're based in the Czech Republic. That's where our head office is. We're about 250 people today. We really pride ourselves. We've built our own large language model from the kind of very, very beginning, actually before large language models existed. And that large language model has now processed over $1.8 trillion worth of transactions, right? It's a private language model. I know today we'll go on and talk around some of the compliance and the security risks with AI. So that will be a big area that we can touch on as well. And what that has meant is that the data and the accuracy and the capability of the AI from having specific training on transactional documents, it means that the effort and the output is a significant difference over many of the existing processes and technologies in play today.
Okay, so that is an amazing amount of documents. I'm just wondering the value creation component of all of this. This is how we talk to CFOs all the time. What are you driving to the bottom line? Maybe can you give us a client example? Bring it to life for everybody out there.
Yeah, well, I think so. If you think about today, if you think about finance teams and AP teams, right? And you think about the type of documents we work with, we think of them, they are high volume documents, they're transactional documents, and very often in the teams of CFO teams and finance teams today, they are burdened with a lot of manual tasks, right? It's manually applying GL codes, it's keying in data, it's responding to suppliers. And that focus distracts from what they could be doing, right? So if you think about what we do from that automation standpoint, we're allowing finance teams to actually get more access and identify opportunities that exist on many of these documents. A really good example, many organizations work very hard to negotiate things like early payment discounts with their suppliers. But of course, because they're just being put into a backlog, many finance teams today miss those early payment discount opportunities. We have a very large distributor that work with us. They process about 1 million to 1.5 million invoices a year. They were completely missing all of their early payment discounts. Those early payment discounts were equating for about $500,000 a month on average, which we're now saving them and enabling them to, number one, process, number two, capture, and now take advantage of as well. So really impactful savings just from that side of things.
So is that the most common use case, or are there other things that are being flagged out there? So early payment, absolutely, we're seeing that a ton, and it's awesome to know that Rossum is pulling that out. But what are the big use cases just across the board?
Yeah, I mean, so the big use cases, there's probably, I always think that it starts with three things that every CFO, every boardroom cares about today, right? They're looking at how do we become more operationally efficient as a business? How do we become more cost efficient as a business? And ultimately, how do we leverage AI, right? I believe that in every FTSE business, every Fortune 100, Fortune 1000 company today, they're all asking themselves those three questions. Fortunately, I believe Rossum achieves all three of those, right? So operational efficiency for me. Many people are saying, look, we either need to continue to grow our teams to keep up with the processes and the data and everything that we need to do. How do we do more with less? Or how do we decrease headcount or enable that headcount to go and focus on more meaningful tasks? How do we make our money work harder? So I mentioned things like early payment discounts. One of the biggest areas that companies aren't able to do today just because of that manual backlog is things like looking at terms. How do we make sure that we're paying terms either on time? How are we making sure that an invoice that comes in on the 7th of the month that had the 1st of the month should be being paid with 30 days from date of receipt as opposed to date of invoice? How are we making sure we're capitalizing on that? And then the third one on that is how are we using that data to better inform our business decisions? How are we renegotiating with suppliers? How are we making sure that we are consolidating spend in different areas? Huge opportunity within that area there as well. And then obviously AI is an overall view. How are we using AI to benefit our business, right? Is that enabling me to make better strategic decisions? Is it enabling me to communicate better with customers and my suppliers and my vendors? That's a whole another area that I think is also really important.
Yeah, that's great. So I will tell you, when we're talking to finance functions, they're often just obsessed with the first part of your example there, which is just the efficiency aspect of this. But what they're not thinking about is how to reallocate their time to the reporting, to the insights, to the things that they're not able to find because they don't have time to do it. Yeah. And they're stuck in spreadsheets, or they're stuck sifting through the documents trying to pull out the insights that this tool can do. So it's efficiency, but it's really, you have to think about value creation on the back end. Of
course.
How do you calculate value creation when you're talking to customers, Zach? Like, is this a conversation that comes up all the time? How do you get the funding for the investment for this tool?
Yeah, I mean, I think value creation, it's, and I'm sure anybody that's listening today will know that actually every business is different in terms of how they perceive value. A lot of it kind of starts at the top level, right? There is always a financial aspect of that, right? It's the, what are we not doing that we could be doing to make more money out of the way that our business is working? So the things we spoke about earlier, early payment discounts, working capital, there is very often, and we see it time after time in large enterprise businesses, there has now become a very hard reliance on temp staff. Temp staff are being used to deal with the backlog, to deal with the workload. And actually, for many organizations, all they're trying to do is rid the backload and get back to the team that they've built themselves, as opposed to continue to hire more staff. That's where technology can really come in. I think the other side of those business propositions is enabling those businesses to look forward and say, well, actually, what are we going to do? All right. The value for me, and I know we spoke about this perhaps last week at one point, but I have a very strong view on back office teams predominantly being seen by finance departments as back office, and actually moving them to be able to become value creators for the organization, right? Enabling them to say, look, this is where we should be forecasting. We're closing at this, but there's this outstanding, or where do we focus our time, or we should be renegotiating here, or here. And they can only become that if they have the data. They have things that they can use, they can action, and then they can move forward with and provide that back to the business.
Yeah, that is the value creation that finance produces right there.
Yeah.
And so you're getting into a scaled concept as far as resourcing, right? And there's so many companies trying to grow out there. Often the CFO asks us about invoice to pay. They start right there. It's their suspicion. It's what they drive right into as far as cost savings, but also just how do I scale? How do I make this kind of an automated process, AI driven rather than manual? So you're getting right to it, but you're getting to the value proposition that is finance. And I will tell you, like the insights that you're talking about there, those are not always evident. They're not easy to dig out of the tools.
Yeah.
So Zach, tell us more. Is the CFO the buyer? Is it the CTO? What are you seeing out there as far as who is purchasing Rossum AI?
So both. Always. I think we've moved away, certainly in the last few years, from having a single buyer of any technology now, right? But what I do see is I see that there is a middle ground that both the CFO and the CTO are really considering when they're making technology decisions today. I think number one, from a CTO standpoint, they're looking to, what we see is they're looking to consolidate technologies, right? They're not looking to buy point solutions anymore. And that plays into where the CFO is also looking at, right? They're looking at how do we consolidate technology spend? And if we are going to spend, that spend needs to be applicable in multiple use cases, right? So if you think about some of the key areas that we work in shared service centers as a great example, where shared service centers are typically doing more than one process. They might be doing accounts payable, they may be doing bills of lading, proof of delivery, they may be doing accounts receivable. So a lot of the work that we do, I mentioned earlier, we very often, a lot of our customers are in accounts payable. A very large proportion also sit within the shared service functions. So they want to be able to give more back to their business. So that is, we can do accounts payable, accounts receivable, we can do logistics documents. Order management is another huge opportunity within there. And what we're seeing is that buyer persona love the fact that they can buy technology that scales with them as well over time. So huge opportunity within that space.
Okay, moving across a lot of different processes there, a lot of different document types. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So large enterprise is where you started when you introduced the tool. That's where you're making a lot of ground out there. What are the nuances of large enterprise clients, problems they're trying to solve at that level?
I think it's any large enterprise. They're not new in the world, right? They've spent many years to get to the size and the scale that they are, and very often throughout that time period, they have accumulated a fair bit of technology debt, right? If you look at some of the large enterprises, we work with a Siemens, a Sony, a Bosch, a Panasonic, etc. They very often are not particularly unified in the way that they have built their technology stacks. They may have ERP systems that are different in different regions globally. We obviously are a global solution and we can handle that different connectivity into different downstream systems. Many of them have a Coupa or a procurement system that works with indirect spend, and they'll have their SAPs that are dealing with direct spend. So really complexity is what the kind of value lever is behind these large enterprises, right? They've got to the point of building and buying, and actually today they're in that technological sort of debt phase where they can't go and rip out their ERP system and centralize once more, but they do need a solution that can give them that centralization that sits perhaps above that ERP system for things like rules, for workflows, for understanding. I think that's really where we see ourselves today in that large enterprise segment.
You mentioned kind of IT sprawl, the scalability of your platform. We are having a lot of conversations right now about build versus buy.
Yeah.
So one of the things we have seen is that you mentioned some different platforms that you kind of plug into and play with.
Yeah.
But some of the build solutions that we're seeing out there are more of a strategy around how do I extract a bunch of different data sets, move it into one place, and build agents end to end on top of it.
Yeah.
Now, it takes a lot of talent. It takes broad talent to be able to get there and do that. There's a lot of risk and governance considerations with standing all of that up. But we're seeing a lot of end-to-end value come from that. And you can go very deep beyond just end-to-end process, cutting across processes and workflows, really targeting value-added outcomes. So tell us how you think about Rossum in the context of a buy, maybe of your Rossum AI product versus building the solutions as I just described.
Yeah, I think, and look, it's very different depending on the business and the decision that the business has made, right? And I often see the build versus buy really actually coming down to the question of ownership, and who wants to own the process and who wants to own the technology. When we look at the CTO persona and you talk around the build your own agent, your consolidation of data, perhaps using a typical large language or a hyperscaler, an AWS or a Copilot or something like that. Again, and we'll come on to talk a little bit more about this, there's capability to build an agent that does something that sits within that technology stack, right? It's lots of different areas. Where we see from a perspective of Rossum, it's giving power and usability back to the business owner. So creating a framework where they can simply use a Copilot to write code or write rules or workflows or processes that exist within there, but have a solution that is designed to truly automate that process end to end, right? And we've been doing it for 9 years, and we've learned a lot of different pieces on as we go through. But the build versus buy is always going to be a question, and it's certainly one that we can talk about today. We had a large customer of ours. It was, I'd say, funny story. They were on the last stretches of about to sign with Rossum and work with Rossum, and their CTO had spent some time at the weekend, and they were on Twitter. And they forwarded me over an email, and it was an email from their CTO that was forwarding them a tweet and said, "I created a bot to extract data from an invoice in less than 24 hours. You should be doing it yourself." And they said, "Look, you're going to have to help us here. You're going to have to help us." And the reality is yeah, in theory, that absolutely is correct, right? You can use a large language model to look at an invoice and to extract that data from the invoice. But actually, then what do you do? Right? It's the reality of that process. And we very often talk about it as to where do you move the problem to, right? And then how many more agents do you want to keep building to try and solve those problems to actually try and automate that journey from end to end? So if you think about extracting that data, in a finance department, extracting the data is actually, as we've realized, a really small percentage of the challenge they have. It's things like, well, what if all of the data on there is not correct? Who then extracts it and calculates to make sure the total amount does equal the sum of the lines? Who is reading it in different languages? Who is associating the GL codes? If there is something that's wrong with that document, or if you need to process that data down into a downstream system, an ERP or a procurement system, who is the one that's then going to take off the leading zeros at the beginning of the invoice number so that it fits that downstream system? Who's going to recognize that was a duplicate document, as an example? All of those little pieces, they are often very forgotten about when you think of that build versus buy persona, right? You think of data extraction, which is great, but then you're moving that you have the other problems that work all the way down into getting that truly automated from ingestion into those downstream systems.
I think sometimes right now what we're seeing is that finance is trying to position themselves as an app builder almost. And that's not necessarily the skill set they grew up with. Right. So to your point, they're not thinking holistically about solving the end-to-end problem. They're not thinking about the user journey and the human-centered design element of working with the tool and what this should look like. So are they taking the time? And this is with all things transformation. Like, we notice this all the time where requirements are what are a shortcut, right? You go right to the solution, trying to plug in the technology and trying to run with it. And if you don't take the time to think about the user journey, the design thinking, all the way through to the risk and governance framework, the approval process, what it should look like, or even just challenging yourself to rethink the existing process altogether, you need to spend that transformation time when you're thinking about AI. The tools are just too powerful.
It was one of the things that our founders first considered when building Rossum. They realized that with AI, AI is only as good as the training that then gets fed back into the AI, right? It needs to be able to learn. It needs to be able to, if you treat it like a human, it needs to also be able to learn instantaneously. You don't want to wait 30 days for a recalibration and a new piece of learning. And that was really important. The other thing that they realized is that actually they don't want for the users and the teams, they shouldn't have to do something that's different to their day-to-day in order to train the AI model. The way that we built the technology is that actually just through normal use of annotating a document or saying this date is correct, or actually the invoice number should be here versus here, that should be the feedback loop for AI and for training, right? It should just come naturally, because that way you get that buy-in, and that training should just be a part of the everyday workflow and the journey, as opposed to training being something which is completely separate from the overarching view of what you're trying to achieve on a daily basis.
Okay, so we talked about build versus buy. We talked about co-pilots, and if you just think about the build and the risk and governance maybe that is required around all of that. Tell us about what does Rossum solve for in the risk, governance, compliance space, SOX, internal controls. Oftentimes we're talking to that buyer just as much as we're talking to the CFO when we get into tech architecture discussions.
Number one, AI is always the thing, as I mentioned, and the three things that every boardroom's talking about. AI is one they're talking about. It's also the one that they're most kind of risk conscious of, right? It's the unknown is probably the more scary aspect of AI than what it can achieve, and very much there is a safety and security part within that. I think one of the things that Rossum has done, and actually perhaps there's a nuance to this, but we have owned and operated our own large language model since day one. So we don't use third-party models. We don't use any of the open source large language models that many enterprises just have access to today, right? That's your ChatGPTs of the world, et cetera, and your co-pilots. The reason for that is because we understand the relevance of being really specific and having dedicated outcomes for what we deem are precision critical documents. So in the world of AP or the world of finance, you can't afford to have that concern or that risk or that worry that it's going to read $100,000 as $1 million. You can't afford for it to read the date and know that date should be the 5th of June instead of the 6th of May, right? It's those things which are really important to organizations, and they're the things that people don't know about. What we have built at Rossum within our large language model is a couple of different things. Number one, confidence scores. Now, confidence scores, again, I'm sure you know, are on a range of 0 to 100, and that allows people to learn, engage, and train the platform so they can get confident with different fields they want to capture. Many of our customers will say, well, look, on an invoice, I want total amount, and I want to know that I'm confident there. Billing address, not so much. I'm okay if that's not there, right? And that's how you start to build automated models. And the other thing about confidence scores is it allows us the way that we've architected the technology to have what we call is a discriminative decoder. So for many organizations and if you look back at some of the scary news online, there's this thing called AI hallucinations. That's where you ask it to either do something or provide some information for you, and it just comes up with that information because it can't find it on the document. What we have understood is the importance of knowing that when you have an invoice for $100,000, you need the AI to be confident that it is $100,000. It's due on the 5th of June. This is what it is, and this is why it comes in here, right? So a lot of that really comes into its own. And that's a huge area when it comes to the reassurance, the security, the compliance protocols, and really why we're proud to work with some of the joint customers that we have today in the medical space, the healthcare space, the financial space, right? That's real trust and real partnership that has to come into play.
That is exactly how I've described Rossum to clients.
Good.
Is that they have figured out, to within the 99% accuracy, all of the invoice formats that have ever been created in the world and how to decipher them. And that trust couldn't be more important. So we talked about AI, who's the buyer? The enterprise is the buyer for AI. Yeah. All eyes are on it. And you're hitting on something that couldn't be more important or couldn't come up more in our conversation, which is model drift, risk and security. How do I make sure this thing's not hallucinating, even if you put the wrong data in? I think a lot of times finance functions or just enterprises forget how risk how much risk you take on with manual processes and manual data entry and processing this stuff yourself, which is, there's a lot of drift that goes on in that as well, right? But to make your model so specific so as to solve this problem across all of the documents you mentioned, let's not just focus in on invoice to pay.
Yeah.
Like that's focus. You can build controls around all of that, and that scales really, really well. So in your last answer, Zach, you mentioned the importance of the partnership with CrossCountry, and we love working with partners that mirror our culture. Culture is number one here at CrossCountry. That's what we built this firm on. That's how we outpace our competitors. We hold ourselves to account in the interview process, and we love finding partners and clients that mirror that culture. So tell us a little bit about what it's been like for you working with CrossCountry. Any fun stories out there in the field?
Yeah. So number one, cultural alignment has been undoubtedly the biggest opportunity for success between our two businesses. I think when I look at Rossum and I look back and I think we have fantastic people, fantastic product, and a fantastic opportunity ahead of us. Without a shadow of a doubt, that is exactly why I believe Rossum and CrossCountry have been working together. You see the people, there's a reason why you guys continue to win Best Place to Work. There's a reason why you deliver amazing projects. And I actually really love from an outlook perspective, how you've lent into this partnership with Rossum, seeing the opportunity of actually that AI development in the market over the last few years. But also actually the innovation that we're trying to do. I mean, I love working with the team at CrossCountry. We're continually being asked, well, what about this? Or could we do this? And could we do this? And I think it's that level of drive and compassion across both businesses of trying to do more for our customers and continuing to innovate for our customers that has made it incredibly successul. It's not to say that we've not been partners for as long as many of the other partners. I think we've been partners for coming up to just over 2 years now, and it was interesting how we started. Right, we both crossed each other's paths at a few different events, and eventually, like with all partnerships, you take the leap and want to introduce a customer and say, look, this customer is a great customer. CrossCountry obviously picked their hardest customer for us. They picked a global enterprise with global language complexity, global tax engines, all the different shared service centers and all of those things. But I think that really enabled both of us to have a foundation that CrossCountry had amazing customers, and those customers loved CrossCountry. And I think it enabled CrossCountry to see that Rossum had amazing technology and it could really solve some of the hardest challenges. And if you start there, everything else is kind of easier moving forward.
We hazed you a little bit. Is that what you're saying
maybe.
in your first job?
Yeah, maybe.
But it sounds like you delivered in a big way. And I know that you did. I know the story. And I would add just, value creation is something that we're talking to our clients about all the time. We've mentioned it now 5-6 times on this podcast alone. And this tool is producing value at a very big level. And we don't partner with everyone. We look for the cultural fit. We look for the right technology. I think, we stood up an AI innovation lab. I'm the head of that lab. And, we are looking at every tool out there. We're tracking every trend. We're trying to enable our consultants with the latest and greatest. And Rossum has been an amazing partner for us. And we're, steadfast in the partnership. So for our listeners out there, people are probably thinking about this tool. They're interested. You've definitely piqued my interest, even more so today, Zach. Hearing some of your stories and the scalability is just incredible. I'm just wondering. So they're probably thinking, how do I get started? What's the advice you would give to the listeners if they're thinking about this tool? Where do you start?
Yeah. So I think the ideation starts with something, right? So if you take we've got tons of invoices. That's one place to start. Do we have a need? Do we feel like we could be better? Do we feel like we could do something more in that space? And there's a great kind of almost think a light bulb moment that should trigger that journey to start. My best advice for any CFO, CTO that's going on that journey or thinking about things is to really zoom out and look at the end-to-end journey, right? When a customer comes to us today, or we collaborate with CrossCountry with a customer, we tend to take a zoom out and we want to look at the problem holistically. You spoke earlier around how it's very easy to solution quickly and think that that's the solution there, but actually zooming out and saying, okay, great, what is our bigger problem? What are we trying to solve for? We're not trying to solve for an individual problem when it comes to data extraction or automating GL coding. We're actually trying to solve the problem of taking a document from here and processing all the way through down to here, right? Or we're trying to solve the problem of improving NPS in our shared service center, or we're trying to improve CSAT within our customers. Those things in themselves are really dramatic as a high level view. And then what I always recommend is, one of the things that we do is reach out. All right, Cross Country have fantastic experience working with the CFO office, the transformation office, building those relationships to drive different people and offer advice. I think that's one of the key things that we often do with our customers is we say, look, just have a chat with someone. They'll be able to give you some insight from that side, and also test it. Take a look at the technology, ask the teams, ask the people. That's it's also really important from that side.
Yeah, we mentioned requirements gathering and how not all companies are good at that at the outset of a transformation, right? And we'd love to get in at the front end and just spend some time. Let's spend a couple weeks. Let's go through the current state. Let's think big together. Let's ideate. Let's think about the human-centered design.
Yeah.
And we love having our partners with us in that discovery process, right? Getting through the discovery, getting through the assessment period. But it's rapid. You can do it faster than ever and get to the answer faster than ever. We've seen these problems before. We've solved these problems before. So we know how to diagnose the symptoms pretty quickly and get at it. So yeah, I look forward to partnering with you on that. So thank you for being here.
No
Zach.
problem. Thank you.
Really enjoyed the conversation, full of information. And this is I just think about all the things we covered here. It's efficiency, it's value creation, it's scale, insights, not to be overlooked, right? And it's controls, governance, risk, compliance. Like this is all in one box, thinking end to end about getting to the outcome, getting to the end solution. And it is in a controlled environment with a model that's not going to drift. So building that trust, building that accuracy, that's so important for the processes that we mentioned and went through today. So there you have it. That is Rossum AI, big value out there in the market, and we really appreciate Zach's time today. Thanks for coming, and that's it for Field Notes.